later on in Rishi Sunak's speech, really going full fascist, really just threatening to punish people for speech. Now, this is what Russell talks about here, is that, you know, much to the chagrin of the modern Democratic Party, we do have a codified First Amendment here in America, which is why most of even the most unhinged Democrats don't sound quite this unhinged when threatening to crack down on free speech. Not to say they wouldn't if they could. Trust me, if Neera Tanden were at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, there'd be no First Amendment, okay? So I'm not letting them off the hook, but I'm saying this is what happens when you don't have something like that in writing. This is the kind of speech you get. Let's go back to little Rishi Sunak.
We must be prepared to stand up for our shared values in all circumstances, no matter how difficult. And I respect that the police have a tough job in policing the protests we have seen and that they are operationally independent. But we must draw a line. Yes, you can march and protest with passion. You can demand the protection of civilian life. But no, you cannot call for violent jihad. There is no context in which it can be acceptable to beam anti-Semitic tropes onto Big Ben in the middle of a vote on Israel-Gaza.
Okay, stop right there. We just have to stop right there because Russell was actually in London covering the Day X hearings and went to the protest that little Rishi Sunak is talking about. So let's go to the video here and let's see what tropes were projected onto Big Ben. He says you can't project tropes onto Big Ben. There's going to be consequences. The cops are going to crack down on you if you do that. So let's take a look at the tropes that were on Big Ben. This is Russell's own footage. Stop bombing Gaza. Cease fire now. Shocking. Stop bombing Gaza. See, so then it starts again. So you see, we didn't selectively edit around the quote-unquote tropes. That's what was projected onto Big Ben. Stop bombing Gaza, ceasefire now. So if those are anti-Semitic tropes, I say as a Jewish man, we really need to call a meeting. If stop bombing people is now an anti-Semitic trope, I think us Jews need to really call a meeting and get our messaging straight, because those are not tropes. Those are not tropes. Those are statements for peace, and they're not defacing Big Ben. It's a hologram projection. Activists did that at Yankee Stadium here in New York. They didn't graffiti Yankee Stadium. You can't do that. No. They projected an image. The stadium was fine, just like Big Ben was fine. And the only messages put on there were ceasefire now, stop bombing Gaza. Okay, let's go back to the end of this. We just wanted to debunk that.
There can be no cause that you can use to justify the support of a prescribed terrorist group like Hamas. And yes, you can freely criticize the actions of this government, or indeed any government. That is a fundamental democratic right. But no, you cannot use that as an excuse to call for the eradication of a state or any kind of hatred or anti-Semitism. This week, I've met with senior police officers and made clear it is the public's expectation that they will not merely manage these protests, but police them. And I say this to the police: we will back you when you take action. But if we are asking more of the police, we in government must also back up that call with action. To that end, this month the government will implement a new, robust framework for how it deals with this issue, to ensure that we are dealing with the root causes of this problem, and that no extremist organizations or individuals are being lent legitimacy by their actions and interactions with central government. You cannot be part of our civic life if your agenda is to tear it down. We will redouble our support for the PREVENT program to stop young minds being poisoned by extremism.
So I just want to pause it. You cannot be part of our civic life if we perceive your agenda, meaning your political points of view, as subversive. And now he goes into a few examples of what they're going to do to crack down on you.
There's no room for dissent.
Right. Exactly. Almost done.
We will redouble our support for the PREVENT program to stop young minds being poisoned by extremism. We will demand that universities stop extremist activity on campus. We will also act to prevent people entering this country whose aim is to undermine its values. The Home Secretary has instructed that if those here on visas choose to spew hate or protest or seek to intimidate people, we will remove their right to be here. And our Britain must not be a country in which we descend into polarized camps, with some communities living parallel lives. It is not enough to live side by side. We must live together, united by shared values and a shared commitment to this country.
I thought a free society was you live side by side, even if your values differ.
Even if you have different values.
Even if you have different values, living side by side, that's what...
There's only one value.
Democracy. Right,
and
exactly.
I just want to say, his claim that people are calling for violence, if you go back to our Twitter feed, because I live streamed it, it was February 21st, go watch it. I walked through that whole protest outside the House of Parliament. You show me somebody threatening violent jihad.
I tell you what they do.
Show me where you see that in the footage.
I tell you what they do. It's about context. So there'll be young guys there draped with Palestinian flags, screaming, absolutely screaming. Right. Women and children, our babies, are being blown apart, torn apart, shot, killed, burned, and they're passionate. They're not going, we need to kill people, we need to do that. But they are passionate. And because they're angry, that is misconstrued as violence. And it's not. It's not. I haven't seen any violence. I haven't seen anyone calling for violence.
But how terrified should your fellow countrymen be? I mean, even not your fellow countrymen. If you're here on a work visa and we perceive you to have views that are not consistent with what I, Rishi Sunak, believe are the values that hold our society together. You see how vague this is? You see how easy it is for them to just deem you out of bounds and not only take you out of civic life, which is bad enough. I mean, that's horrible in and of itself. They'll kick you out of the fucking country. They'll kick you out of the country if you're there on a visa and you don't say the right things or profess the right quote unquote values.
That speech was dystopian and terrifying. And it's really interesting to watch this because I think it's partly because you do have some history of a kind of under the surface white nationalist movement. You know, you had what was his name before World War II? Patton. You know what I'm Oswald.
Yeah, with the black shirts. There's been various.
Yeah. So you
Patton
see
Oswald,
things like
that's it. That's
Patton Oswald. I thought that was the right name, but I was like, hang on,
I'm
is that
kidding.
a comedian?
That's a comedian. Yes. Yes.
No. What is the guy's Oswald Mosley? Oswald Mosley. That's his name. See, you fucked me up, man. That's
and he had a famous son.
That's it. Now we're gonna have to cut around this. You happy now? You happy now?
Cut around it. Yeah, I was just joking.
So I think because of that, when you see and because of the lack of a First Amendment, you know, when I talked to my daughter who was raised in England about this, she said, "Yeah, there's never been freedom of speech in England. There is no freedom of not really. There's no bedrock freedom of speech." So you get these visions like V for Vendetta that are a conservative manifestation of those strains where you'd have this conservative dystopia would take over England, Children of Men, you know, that kind of thing. And you watch this and it's actually much more, this is a dystopia arisen from neoliberalism. And it's a really terrifying vision where you're just going to create a fascist, repressive state around this sloganeering about equality and diversity. Meanwhile, you're actually creating the police state that had always been presented as being a conservative danger.
Of course. So when Sunak came out and stood outside Number 10, the bastion of modern democracy, Number 10, respected throughout the world, as you know, all the rest of it. He stood there and he gave his speech about British values and our values and all that BS, because it's all hypocritical. I know. When I saw that, when I first saw that, when it happened, I remember thinking, so you're talking about British values. I know that he personally sanctioned the Ministry of Defence to send US cluster bombs over to Ukraine. Now, the only reason I know that is because I know the guys at the Ministry of Defence that physically facilitated the delivery of them. It's not someone said something I read online. I know the people involved personally. So all of this, so
How do
he
you
broke
know
the
them?
law.
They
He broke.
drink your gin one night. They get liquored up with you, and
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, have another glass of wine.
They smuggle the arms in your gin deliveries.
It's a big flower speaking to the. But yeah, so the hypocrisy knows no limits. Really, is what I was trying to make. It knows no limits.
It's amazing. I mean, that is a truly terrifying speech.
I mean, do you worry being there? Because it was one of the first clips we showed was me interviewing some British people when I went over there about the speech issue. And I think some people thought I was exaggerating. So what are your thoughts about that? Do you worry about speech? I mean, we won't get into details, but before we came on, there's certain things you told us we can't talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of an answer right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but they're for legal reasons.
Right.
They're for legal reasons. Right. And in the same way, if you were involved in those things, I wouldn't go out and say things that would jeopardize what you were doing. So that's, so that's not really a free speech issue, if that makes sense. Right. That would just be protecting George, for example.
Right.
In the way that I would protect you or anybody else. But yeah, no, I'm the last person to have been arrested, and I'm a big guy. I'm not violent. I don't stand there ranting and effing and swearing. I just don't. It's not in my nature. I couldn't do that if I tried. As you know, I was raised as Jehovah's Witness. But I was the last person to be arrested at Speaker's Corner, and this would have been. So this would have been.
You were the last person arrested. They still do it, don't they? They still.
Yeah, but I was the last person to be arrested there.
Okay.
So free speech. It's an enclave. It's been there for a long time. You can go there. You can say anything you want. Pretty much. I mean, all free speech is governed by law. Right. So you can't incite violence. I can't go there and go right. We need to beat up so and so.
Sure.
I'll be arrested. So that's not free speech. So all free.
Well, we
speech.
have that here. I mean, you can't incite violence against an individual, but you wouldn't see anyone come up here. I mean, maybe Trump would do it, but there'd be no enforcement mechanism by which he could actually prosecute someone for, say, espousing values contrary to Donald Trump. Like, you couldn't actually threaten someone with, like, police action for that the way Sunak just did there.
So and what are the implications of that for someone like you, who's a political activist?
Well, so I'll give you a real example. 2010, I'm at Speaker's Corner. I've got a big crowd there. They're all listening to what I've got. They're all sad. They've all got too much time on their hands. They're all listening to me. And there's undercover counter-terrorist police officers in the crowd. Now, I know who they are because of the questions that they ask me. So I've been going there for a year. So I'm dealing with the public and passers-by, and you get a feel for what's coming. And these officers would always ask specific questions that were really specific, that I knew that if I'd answered them in a certain way, I'd get in trouble. So I didn't. So I deliberately didn't. Now, on that particular occasion when I was arrested, I wasn't charged, by the way. They just carted me off, arrested me, stuck me in the cells, gave me cups of tea, and then let me out. I wasn't charged. But on that occasion, there was a right-wing a right-wing group that were demonstrating 50 to 60 meters away from where I was standing. And there was some right-wing guys and some Asians, and they all had a fight, and they were physically fighting. And the police all piled in, separated them, stopped the fighting, didn't arrest anybody. And they were physically punching each other. I'm standing there very peacefully, handing out leaflets, talking to people, and I get carted away.
Wow.
There's your scenario.
Wow.
There's your scenario.
That's amazing.
Please clap.